On Saturday the 19th of March 2011, just before 3 a.m, Sian O'Callaghan left the Swindon nightclub where she had enjoyed a night out with friends. She left alone and began to walk the half a mile to the Swindon flat she shared with her partner Kevin Reap. She wouldn't arrive. By 3:24, her worried boyfriend texted her asking where she was and if she was okay. After a fretful night, he called the police at 9:45 to tell them his partner was missing and wasn't answering his calls. He made it clear this wasn't like her. On the 20th of March, the police appealed to the public for any information they might have concerning Sian's disappearance. After analysing her phone signal, they found it to be coming from the Savernake Forest area. They also stated that the time between leaving the nightclub and the text sent to her phone from her boyfriend at 3:24 showed she was at Savernake Forest, which meant that she must have travelled the 12 to 15 miles from Swindon to the forest in Wiltshire by car. The community where she lived was shocked to hear of the young girl's disappearance and came together to help. On the 22nd of March, an anonymous donor offered a £20,000 reward for any information on Sian's disappearance. A search team was organised and around 400 members of the public joined the police scouring the area. The search was vast, but people wanted to help. While the search continued, the police force's technical team managed to scale down the search area through signals from Sian's phone. The public search party were asked to stand down as the inquiry was moving fast and some significant information had developed. On the 24th of March, the police appealed to the public for any information on a green Toyota Avensis. It was a taxi seen on the day Sian went missing. CCTV had caught the taxi roaming the area that night, close to where Sian had exited the nightclub. After 3 days, the police had the name Christopher Halliwell. The police had their suspect, and an intense surveillance started, watching his every move. They watched as he seemingly went about his usual day, but in fact he was apparently trying to get rid of any evidence by cleaning the interior of the car and burning the car seat covers. They knew they had to act quickly when it became apparent he may try to take his own life, when they saw him buying a large quantity of medication. The police moved in quick on the 24th of March in a supermarket car park and arrested Halliwell on suspicion of kidnapping.
This was the moment of arrest. A West Country Tonight viewer took these photos as a man was stopped on suspicion of kidnapping Sian. The arrest happened at about midday at this superstore in Swindon. Witnesses describe seeing police surround a taxi cab, arrest a man, then search the car before taking it away. Police were tracing a green Toyota Avensis with taxi stripes, and on the right of this photo, that's what was seized as the man was taken into custody.
A short time ago, a man was arrested on suspicion of the kidnap of Sian O'Callaghan.
Detective Superintendent Steve Fulcher, who was leading the investigation, asked Halliwell to tell him where Sian was. He asked again and again. Eventually, Halliwell broke down and admitted to killing Sian.
If it goes to court and I'm found guilty, that's it. They lock me up and throw me away the key. If I can clear this up in the next few hours, will everything else be forgotten? Because at the end of the day...
Halliwell then directed DS Fulcher to Uffington in Gloucestershire, where he had moved the body to. Sian's body was discovered laying in the undergrowth. But Halliwell had more to say. While they were at the scene, Halliwell went on to reveal another murder. He turned to Fulcher and coldly said, "Give me another cigarette and I'll give you another body." Fulcher felt he had to listen as Halliwell was eager to talk, and he kept him talking. Fulcher then drove Halliwell to where another body was buried. On the 26th of March 2011, 25 miles away in East Leach, Gloucestershire, remains were found. Halliwell, 47, was charged with the murder and kidnapping of 2 women. Unfortunately, Detective Superintendent Fulcher's actions would prove controversial, as he breached Halliwell's rights by failing to caution him and denying him a solicitor. Becky Godden's remains were identified on the 4th of April 2011. Her devastated family had been looking for her for 8 years. Halliwell is remanded into custody without bail. At the Magistrates' Court in Bristol, a riot breaks out when members of the public raged against the cold killer. Over 100 people chased a police van transporting Halliwell to and from the court. Throughout all the court hearings, Halliwell maintained his innocence. On the 31st of May 2012, Halliwell once again denies murdering Sian O'Callaghan at Preston Crown Court. The charge of murder for Becky Godden is removed. Mrs. Justice Cox rules that evidence gained following Halliwell's arrest, i.e. the confession, was inadmissible. Fulcher had failed to follow procedure, and there was no other evidence to link Halliwell to Becky Godden's death. On October the 19th, 2012, Christopher Halliwell pled guilty to the murder of Sian O'Callaghan at Bristol Crown Court. He was sentenced to a minimum of 25 years. Wiltshire police suspended Mr. Fulcher, but the family of Sian O'Callaghan thanked him for finding their daughter's body so quickly. Mr. Fulcher would resign in 2014. Justice was done for Sian, but Becky's family had yet to see justice done for their daughter. Karen Edwards, Becky's mother, attended the trial, and after she made a statement, after a very complicated and painful journey over the last 18 months, Sian's family have today had the justice for the murder of their beautiful daughter. However, our family's fight for justice for Becky has only just begun. Even though Becky has been found, after all this time, we still have no full understanding of how she met her death. Wiltshire police will be continuing the ongoing investigation into my daughter Becky's murder. The ongoing investigation took the police to Halliwell's former home, where they did a full-scale search of the house and property. In the garden shed they found a shovel that still had dried mud on it. On a hunch, they took the shovel to be forensically tested. Bringing in a forensic soil scientist to test the soil and hoped it matched the soil where Becky was buried. It was a long shot that paid off, and there was only a small amount of soil on the spade. It matched totally with the soil very near to where Becky's body was found. In fact, it could possibly be the exact area. This would link Halliwell to Becky's murder. He could also be placed near the burial site as he ran out of fuel close by and had to call for roadside help. He also had an injury to his hand. Years later, in September 2016, while making sure their case against Halliwell for Becky's murder was rock solid, Halliwell went back to Bristol Crown Court, charged with the murder of Becky Godden-Edwards. Shockingly, Halliwell had decided to defend himself. He was described as very self-assured, a real narcissist. He seemed to enjoy himself when the former Detective Superintendent Fulcher was put on the witness stand. The 2 men faced off, and at one point, former DS Fulcher made a remark that he believed there could be more bodies. Halliwell, looking into the eyes of Fulcher, said, "It was a pleasure ruining your career." After a 2-week trial, Halliwell was found guilty of Becky Godden's murder and given a whole life term. He turned to look at Becky's family and laughed as he was led away. He will never see the outside of prison again. No other murders have ever been connected to Halliwell, but the former DS, Steve Fulcher, is sure there could be more. The pond close to where they found Sian was searched and clothes belonging to both Sian and Becky were found. Other female clothes were also found, so it is possible. Many people believe he didn't leave an 8-year gap between killing Becky Godden and Sian O'Callaghan. They are convinced other women's bodies are out there. It's being suggested there may be at least 27 other women. Sian O'Callaghan left the nightclub and walked towards her home before being picked up by Halliwell in his taxi. What transpired in the car we don't know, but what we do know is Halliwell viciously stabbed her twice in the neck and head and then strangled her. He would then leave her body before heading back to his home he shared with his girlfriend. It's known that Halliwell visited the site he left the body at least 4 times, and when the search became known, he panicked and moved the body to Uffington before the search started. Becky Godden had become a heroin addict and moved away from her family so as not to upset them anymore. She turned to prostitution to pay for her habit, and in this time she met Halliwell. He saw the arrangement between them as a relationship. He saw her as his and only his, but she didn't. The last time anyone saw her, she had argued with a man in a taxi. She then left with him. He strangled her and buried her in a shallow grave in a field at East Leach, Gloucestershire. He also visited the burial site on a number of occasions. When Becky's mum hadn't heard from her for a while, it was thought that she had moved on. Although they were worried about her, they had grown used to the lack of communication from her. But it wasn't like her to not get in touch at some point. Becky's mum looked for her for 4 years, eventually contacting the missing persons hotline. Another 4 years passed, thinking she was in Bristol. Her worried mother even launched an appeal to help locate her daughter. After the sentencing of Halliwell for her daughter's murder in 2016, the police released Becky's remains to her mother. But at the funeral directors, she was informed that some of Becky's remains was missing. She was devastated, and rightly so, but no one seemed to know what had happened, except that Halliwell may have kept them as souvenirs. I can't begin to know what this mother must have gone through, what both families have endured, because of this one evil, manipulative, egotistical, deranged, sadistic excuse of a human being, Christopher Halliwell. He was born in Swindon in 1964 to a violent and extremely abusive mother. His childhood wasn't a happy one. He suffered many beatings at her hands, and he grew up seeing violence as a normal, acceptable way of life. This would, as other serial killers who have been studied would show, be the norm in his relationships with his family. The abuse he suffered at the hands of his mother was apparently the beginning of his hatred for women. His mother was a sadist and would gleefully beat him savagely over an excruciating length of time. She was known to scold him with a hot iron while watching him cry. She never bonded with her son. In fact, she saw him as a burden to her. She didn't want him. She planted the seed of hate towards all women. When he was young, his anger towards her would be taken out on small insects. He would slowly watch the small creatures struggle as he pulled off their legs and wings. And by the age of 15, his mother finally placed him into care, and after leaving the care system, he fell into a life of crime. By 19, he received his first criminal conviction. 4 years in Dartmoor prison, where his thoughts went to darker places. While there, he asked an inmate, "How many people do you have to kill to be classed as a serial killer?" and discussed his terrifying fantasies. On leaving prison, he found it difficult to settle in a job. He had many short-term jobs where he could work alone for most of the time. Eventually, he got married and had children. He was seen as a normal, quiet guy who lived a decent life. He started his own taxi firm and people seemed to like him. But after some time, his marriage suffered. He had started to have affairs, and his darker side, seeping through, took him to prowl the streets for prostitutes. But his twisted fantasies made the women he went with fearful, but it also made him want more. The genial man people had become friends with was living a double life, hiding the darkness within. Being a taxi driver gave Halliwell the perfect cover, as he could prowl the streets at night and nobody would question him. It gave him the ideal opportunity to pick up women, especially prostitutes. One he got particularly close to was Becky Godden. He saw her regularly and began to see her as his own. He became besotted with her. After what's believed to be an altercation between the two, he killed and buried her in a field. She was missing for 8 years. By 2011, a now divorced Halliwell had lost his taxi firm and found work with another taxi company, leaving him free once again to prowl the streets of Swindon. As we know, he would go on to kill again. But what about those 8 years in between? Did he kill other women?